Welcome to this Heritage Open Day podcast from Norwich Cathedral. Cathedral guide Rachel Bond highlights how the Civil War has been memorialised at the cathedral. We hope this podcast will encourage you to visit Norwich Cathedral and see these and other memorials for yourself. Details of our opening times are on our website.
If you visit the battlefield sites of the Civil War, Edgehill, Marston Moor or Naseby, you'll find for the most part that nature and farmland have reclaimed them. At Norwich Cathedral, however, scars and memorials have endured, and they tell us about what happened here during the civil wars between 1642 and 1651, during the Commonwealth and at the Restoration in 1660, and how those events impacted on life in Norwich. In the southwest corner of the cloisters, on a buttress at about head height, is this memorial stone to Joseph Hall, who was made Bishop of Norwich in 1641 and died in 1656. This inscription was made in 1975 when his remains were buried here in the Garth in a special ceremony. The fact that he wasn't buried here originally is due to the conflicting religious views of the royalists and parliamentarians. So the Stuart King Charles I had Catholic leanings. He believed that he ruled by divine right, and he used the bishops to control Church of England practices. Although Joseph Hall was a moderate, when the Puritan parliamentarians defeated and executed Charles I, they abolished all bishops. Joseph Hall was evicted from the bishop's palace, and for a while he was given refuge by a sympathetic resident in the close. But the authorities sequestrated his property, and he ended his days essentially bereft of his status of Bishop of Norwich. He moved out to Higham, a parish on the outskirts of the city, and took up residence in the building known as the Dolphin Inn. He assisted the local parish priest at St Bartholomew's. He specified in his will that he wanted to be buried outdoors and not inside a church. But despite this, his wishes were not respected, and a tomb was prepared for him inside St Bartholomew's during his final illness, and his burial took place within 24 hours of his death. The reason for that being that the atmosphere and attitude to ex-bishops during the Commonwealth years was still so volatile that an outdoor grave was considered too vulnerable to desecration. During the Second World War, that parish church was bombed. The council eventually turned the site into a park, and that is when his remains were reinterred here, which would have pleased him to be outdoors and restored to the cathedral he served. His record of how he came to be expelled from the cathedral is titled Hard Measure, and it includes one of the most detailed eyewitness accounts nationally of the iconoclasm of the Civil War. You may recognise this lament. Lord, what work was here! What clattering of glasses, what beating down of walls, what tearing up of monuments, what pulling down of seats, what wresting out of irons and brass from the windows and graves. In the nave now, base 7 of the south aisle bears a tablet to Dean Fairfax on the pillar. Now, this memorial to Henry Fairfax, Dean of Norwich Cathedral in the late 17th century, is fascinating in what it reveals about unease in the cathedral on both a political and personal level. The family and friends who chose the inscription refer in the second line to his grandfather, Thomas Fairfax, Commander-in-Chief of the New Model Army. The commemoration of his victory over the Royalists at Naseby caused consternation, although almost 60 years had elapsed. The new dean, Dean Prideaux, fearing riots, had it covered over with a cloak until the offending words had been obscured. Prideaux considered it bragging of rebellion and the victory which brought King Charles I to the block. He overlooked the fact that Thomas Fairfax had distanced himself from Oliver Cromwell and the show trial of Charles I, and had gone on to play an active role in the restoration of Charles II. You can also make out that the adjective pious referring to Dean Fairfax was removed. This indicates personal dislike and differences. Elsewhere, Dean Prideaux described Fairfax's whole life as being the ale pot and the pipe, and criticised him for neglecting the cathedral and not opening a book from one year to the next. Dean Prideaux was the man who founded the first cathedral library since the Reformation, so clearly they were not kindred spirits, even though one succeeded the other to the same role. The third and final memorial in this tour is a ledger stone in the floor of the ambulatory on the north side, level with the bishop's throne. It's to the memory of Bridget Gurney, a member of the important Norwich Gurney family. During the Commonwealth, all cathedrals were liquidated. There were calls in the case of Norwich Cathedral for it to be demolished and for the stone to be used to reinforce Great Yarmouth Harbour, or to build a workhouse, or to turn the cathedral itself into a workhouse. None of these projects came to anything, but for the husband of Bridget Gurney, patience was required. Her dates show that she had died in 1652, but as burials couldn't take place at the cathedral during the interregnum period, her interment here was delayed for a full 10 years. This is explained on the stone. King Charles II having been restored, by whose return not only the sleeping places of the living, but also those of the dead, as well as the sacred shrines themselves, are preserved from the violations of fanatics.